In March 2017, Tina Satchwell vanished from her quiet home in the coastal town of Youghal, Ireland, leaving behind her husband, her dogs, and a house full of unanswered questions. For years, no one knew what happened. There were no signs of struggle, no note, and no trace of Tina anywhere. Her husband, Richard, claimed she had simply left after an argument, taking a few belongings and disappearing without a word. But family and friends never believed it. Tina adored her pets, and she would never abandon them. For 6 years, her case remained one of Ireland's most mysterious disappearances, until March 2024, when investigators returned to the same house with a search warrant. Beneath the concrete steps leading to the basement, officers found what they had feared all along: human remains. DNA confirmed it. Tina Satchwell had been there the whole time. As the truth came out, the story of love, lies, and control unraveled, a tale that proved even the most ordinary homes can hide the darkest secrets. Tina Satchwell was the kind of woman people instantly felt comfortable around: cheerful, talkative, and always full of plans. Born in Fermoy, County Cork, she was known for her warm laugh and her deep affection for animals. Friends said she couldn't walk past a stray dog without stopping to feed it. She loved color and life. Her home in Youghal was filled with bright flowers, painted walls, and travel souvenirs from short trips she took with her husband, Richard. To anyone on the outside, their marriage looked ordinary, maybe even loving. But beneath the surface, Tina's world was slowly closing in. She had met Richard in her early 20s, and for years she believed he was her safe place. Calm, reliable, and protective. But over time, that protection began to feel like control. Neighbors would later recall that Tina rarely went anywhere alone. Richard handled the money, the shopping, even most of the phone calls. When friends visited, he often hovered nearby, answering for her. She laughed it off, saying he was just over-caring, but her tone always carried a hint of unease. Still, Tina kept up appearances. She loved decorating their home, cooking, and caring for her 2 dogs, Ruby and Heidi, whom she called her babies. Those dogs were her entire world. She refused to leave them even for short trips. That detail would later haunt investigators, because when she vanished, both dogs were found still at home, unfed, waiting by the door. In the weeks before her disappearance, something in Tina seemed to shift. Friends noticed she was anxious, sometimes tearful. She confided in one of them that she was thinking of leaving for a while, but she didn't say where or why. There were rumors of arguments, of tension building inside the house. One neighbor remembered hearing raised voices late at night, followed by silence. Another saw Tina standing by the garden gate days before she vanished, smoking alone, her eyes distant. Those final glimpses of Tina painted a picture of a woman trapped between fear and hope, wanting freedom but unsure how to take it. To the world, she was a missing person. To those who knew her, she was someone trying desperately to find her way out. And in the years that followed, her name would become synonymous with a mystery no one could let go of. A woman who disappeared not into the world, but into the very walls of her own home. It was the morning of March 24, 2017, when Richard Satchwell first told police that his wife Tina was gone. He claimed she had left 2 days earlier, on the 22nd, after what he described as a small argument. According to him, she had packed a few clothes, taken some cash, and walked out the door without saying where she was going. He said he assumed she just needed space. For 48 hours, he didn't report her missing. When asked why, Richard told officers, "She's done this before, she just needed time to think." But when detectives checked, no one in Tina's family or circle of friends had ever heard of her disappearing like that. It was the first of many inconsistencies that would follow. The couple's home in Youghal looked undisturbed when investigators entered. Tina's purse was still on the kitchen counter, along with her passport, and both of her dogs, alive but hungry, pacing near the back door. There were no signs she had planned a trip, no suitcase missing, no recent withdrawals from her bank account. Detectives grew uneasy. People who knew Tina said she would never leave her pets behind, and certainly not without telling her sister or her best friend. To them, Richard's version of events simply didn't fit the woman they knew. As the investigation continued, Richard gave multiple interviews to the media. He appeared calm, sometimes even oddly composed, Sitting on his couch beside family photos and Tina's belongings, he pleaded for her to come home. His eyes welled up with tears at all the right moments, his voice trembling just enough to sound believable. But behind the scenes, detectives noticed his story kept changing, small details, times, and sequences that never matched. One day he said Tina had stormed out after breakfast. Another day he insisted it was in the evening. Officers began quietly checking his movements in the days following her disappearance. CCTV footage showed him shopping, running errands, and buying concrete mix from a local hardware store. Something he never mentioned. When asked about it, he said it was for house repairs. Investigators couldn't find any record of those repairs ever being made. To the public, Tina was still a missing woman. But within the walls of that small house, detectives began to suspect that she had never really left at all. As the weeks turned into months, the investigation into Tina Satchwell's disappearance grew colder, but detectives refused to give up. The early search efforts had yielded nothing. No trace of Tina, no witnesses who had seen her leave, and no digital footprint after March 22, 2017. Her phone was turned off, her bank account untouched, and her passport still at home. Despite this, her husband Richard continued to insist she was alive and had gone away by choice. He became a familiar face on local news, giving interviews where he spoke softly about missing his wife, even crying at times. But to investigators, his calm, steady demeanor didn't feel right. Most people in his position were frantic, desperate. Richard seemed rehearsed. Inside their small house on Grattan Street, officers searched every corner. They pulled up floorboards, checked the attic, and used cadaver dogs in the yard. Nothing. When police questioned Richard, he offered long, detailed explanations for every question. Too detailed. He said she might have gone to visit family in Fermoy or even moved abroad, but no one in Tina's family had heard from her, and her passport sat untouched in the drawer. As time passed, the public began to take sides. Some believed Richard's tearful interviews, calling him a heartbroken husband unfairly accused. Others saw through the act, pointing out how his story shifted each time he spoke. Meanwhile, detectives quietly reviewed his movements again. They noticed that in the days following her disappearance, Richard made several short trips in his van, always within the same 5-mile radius, and always during the night. When questioned, he claimed he was just driving to clear his head. In 2018, police conducted a major search at the couple's home, digging up parts of the yard and using ground-penetrating radar. The operation lasted 6 days but turned up nothing. Richard publicly criticized the investigation, saying he was being tormented by suspicion. He even moved out of the house afterward, claiming it was too painful to stay. Behind the scenes, though, detectives kept watching him. They never stopped believing that Tina had never left Youghal. They just didn't have the evidence. Yet. The house, once filled with bright colors and laughter, had become a cold shell of secrets. And beneath its quiet floors, something remained buried, waiting for time, technology, and truth to finally uncover it. It was nearly 7 years after Tina Satchwell vanished when the case suddenly roared back to life. In March 2024, detectives received a new tip from a source close to the original investigation. The lead was vague, but it mentioned something hidden under the stairs. At first, the officers were skeptical. They had searched that house so many times that every nail and tile was documented. Still, the new information was enough for a warrant. Early one morning, a team of forensic experts, cadaver dogs, and detectives arrived quietly at the property on Grattan Street. The home, now empty and cold, still carried the ghosts of its past. Dust hung in the air as they began their search. One of the cadaver dogs was led into the basement area. Within minutes, it stopped near the concrete steps and began scratching, whining, and refusing to move. The handler called it in immediately. Investigators marked the area, brought in scanners, and detected a density shift beneath the cement floor. Something solid. Something that didn't belong. Work crews began carefully chipping away at the steps, inch by inch, while detectives watched in silence. The smell hit first, faint but undeniable. Then came the fabric, a corner of a blanket hardened by time. Moments later, a human bone appeared through the rubble. The room fell completely still. Over the next 12 hours, forensic teams worked meticulously, excavating piece by piece. Wrapped in layers of old blankets and plastic sheeting lay the remains of a woman. Jewelry found with the body matched items Tina was known to wear: a silver bracelet, a thin gold chain, and a ring she never took off. When the DNA results came back, there was no doubt. After nearly 7 years of searching,
Tina Satchwell had finally been found, buried in the very home she had disappeared from. Neighbors gathered outside as the news spread. Some cried, others stood in disbelief. For years, many had defended Richard, saying he seemed broken by her loss. Now they watched as police carried evidence boxes out of the house, where she had been hidden all along. The truth wasn't somewhere far away. It had been right there, beneath their feet, under the stairs, where love had turned to horror. When the remains were confirmed to be Tina Satchwell's, detectives knew the investigation had reached its breaking point. For years, Richard Satchwell had lived freely, giving interviews, crying on television, and insisting his wife had just walked away. But now the truth was quite literally unearthed, beneath the home they once shared. When police arrived to arrest him at his small flat in Youghal, he didn't fight or shout. He simply looked down, nodded, and said, "I suppose it's time then." Those who knew him later said he looked almost relieved, as though the weight of 7 years of lies had finally crushed him. In his first interview, Richard tried to control the story one last time. He claimed Tina's death had been an accident, the result of a heated argument that got out of hand. He said she had fallen, hit her head, and died instantly. Panicked, he hid her body, convinced no one would believe him. But investigators weren't buying it. The layers of concrete, the wrapping, the care with which he'd concealed her, none of it looked like panic. It looked like planning. He had bought the materials days before her disappearance and cleaned the house afterward. There was no record of him calling for help or alerting anyone. He didn't bury a mistake, he buried evidence. In court, prosecutors described a man obsessed with control. When he realized Tina wanted to leave, he decided that if she couldn't stay with him, she wouldn't live without him. Every detail pointed to intent, from the isolation he forced upon her to the carefully built false narrative that she'd run off by choice. The jury listened to the recordings of his old interviews, his calm voice denying everything while sitting feet away from where her body was hidden. When the verdict came, Richard Satchwell was found guilty of murder. Outside the courthouse, Tina's family spoke softly to reporters, tears mixing with anger and relief. "We searched everywhere," her sister said.